Joining me now is former U.S. Congressman and syndicated talk show host in his own right, Jason Lewis. You can also check him out and follow him on his Substack, which is jasonlewis.substack.com, jasonlewis.substack.com. Let's talk about Donald Trump taking over Washington, D.C., which I don't have a problem with. I think the federal government traditionally has kind of had the right to run D.C., but what about the talk of taking over other cities? I don't know. I've been warning about the idea of the federalization of police for a while. That makes me a little nervous because I don't want to set the standard for the Marxists to do the same thing. Let's talk about that. Let's talk about the push for lowering interest rates. What does the former congressman think of that? And much more. He joins us now from beautiful Florida. Hello, Congressman.
Hey, Brannon, how are you? Good to see you again.
I'm great. Good to see you as well. By the way, did you notice the IRS commissioner? I don't know if you served in Congress at all with him, Billy Long, but he didn't last but 2 months.
He did not last too long. He was an auctioneer, and apparently he was auctioning too much, I guess. I don't know. But that didn't last long, but that's got to be a tough job.
Yeah. Well, I guess he's going to become the ambassador to Iceland now.
Yeah, I did get a kick out of that, when they kind of shove you out and say, hey, you got a great gig for it. It's ambassador to Iceland. The Arctic isn't far behind.
Yes, exactly. I don't know, but I don't know who he upset or what he did.
An ambassadorship, I guess. Right?
Well, well, with full disclosure, I was really disappointed because I was actually texting with the IRS commissioner for the last month and a half. Did you hear what happened to me?
Wow. Yeah, well, you know what? Somebody else is probably reading those texts now, Brannon. So you better,
I should be careful, right? You heard what happened to us, right? We paid our payroll tax by check.
I did not hear that.
Oh, we paid our payroll you can go to worldviewtube.com/IRS and read the whole story. We wrote it up in a press release. worldviewtube.com/IRS. Paid our payroll tax with a check in 2021 because after COVID and everybody was out of the office, nobody was around. Apparently, they couldn't keep their online portal working to pay the payroll tax online. So after the second day of it being down, my accountant said, overnight on the check. Overnight the check. So we overnight the check. Pretty big size check because it was for the payroll for the year, payroll tax. And we get a letter in the mail saying, you're being penalized $43,000 because you paid with a check versus online.
Really?
Oh, yeah. Apparently, that's IRS above a certain dollar amount. They can penalize you if you write a check.
I didn't know that. It must be e-file on steroids.
Something like that.
That was the rap against, the IRS rolling out this e-file. Pretty soon they were going to make everybody go through their portal. And there's a bunch of free portals out there by companies trying to get people in, and they'll say, I'll do your taxes for free if you're lower income. And the e-file, which I think it's disbanded or will be soon by the new Congress. So we'll see, but I wasn't aware of that. That is
so 43,000
stuff. Here we go.
We appealed, and they sent us an abatement letter saying, "Don't worry about it."
Oh, good.
2 years. Oh no. 2 years later.
Oh, no.
2 years later, they come back and they say, "We want our money, but now you owe $48,000."
Penalties and interest. Yes.
Yeah, and we sent them the abatement letter. Said you abated this 2 years ago. They came back and they gave us another letter clearing us, saying you're all current and fine for 2021, no penalties, you're fine. So we got 2 abatement letters. Then this year, 2025, they come along, they say you owe us over $49,000. We're like, you've abated this twice already. And we had to go up the chain and appeal. And the lady that I was dealing with said, with the IRS, who got the appeal, said, this is ridiculous. We abated it twice. The system was down. It's COVID. People are out of the office. This is stupid. She put everything together to take to her supervisor. Her supervisor said...
The Biden administration didn't have the IRS under control and is covering that? I mean, the competency in that administration was, you would think,
yes,
they'd have it all worked out.
Absolutely. So she was even on my side, went to her boss, and her boss said no. And then they said, to keep appealing it, you have to pay it. So July 3rd, I had to pay it online. And the archaic system of theirs is so old, the IRS agent had to walk me through it. And we were literally guessing at what the questions were, or the answers were to the questions, because they could not line up my organization name correctly. So she and I were both guessing as to what the IRS had done with my organization's name till we finally hit on it. She guessed it right before I did. We were both guessing and we got it paid. So I reached out, got the phone number of Billy Long through a friend and said, look, Commissioner. And he's like, all right. And so he was going to have someone call me and we're working through this and letting him get on, and then boom, he's gone. So I have lost my lifeline.
But you're still in the middle of it.
I paid it, but we're still trying to say, look, this is ridiculous. Yeah. My accountant spent a better part of 7 hours one day, 3-page letter detailing how this all happened, submitting it.
Did they say that the online mandate came from COVID or something, or are they just trying to get everybody going?
Apparently, if your the amount of payroll taxes you pay is above a certain dollar figure, if you don't pay it online, you pay by check, they can penalize you a percentage of that.
Oh, that's crazy.
This dumbest thing in the world. That's our IRS.
Sure is.
So Billy Long, my lifeline is gone in Billy Long. He's been banned to Iceland.
Yeah. There goes that trip. There goes that trip to Reykjavik. Oh well.
Well, let's talk about several things in the news. Let's start with President Trump today. I want to get your take on this. Here's just a little clip of what he had to say. Yep. Here we go.
And we're here for a very serious purpose, Something's out of control, but we're going to put it in control very quickly like we did on the southern border. I'm announcing a historic action to rescue our nation's capital from crime, bloodshed, bedlam, and squalor, and worse. This is Liberation Day in D.C., and we're going to take our capital back. We're taking it back. Under the authorities vested in me as the President of the United States, I'm officially invoking Section 740 of the District of Columbia Home Rule Act. You know what that is? And placing the D.C. Metropolitan Police Department under direct federal control, and you'll be meeting the people that will be directly involved with that. Very good people, but they're tough, and they know what's happening, and they've done it before. In addition, I'm deploying the National Guard to help reestablish law, order, and public safety in Washington, D.C., and they're going to be allowed to do their job properly. And you people are victims of it, too. You know, you're reporters, and I understand a lot of you tend to be on the liberal side, but you don't want to get mugged and raped and shot and killed. And you all know people and friends of yours that happened. And so you can be anything you want, but you want to have safety in the streets. You want to be able to leave your apartment or your house where you live and feel safe and go into a store to buy a newspaper or buy something. And you don't have that now.
So there you go. Now he's talking, Jason, about adding this on to other cities. I have no problem with the federal government doing that in D.C. because I think they have the right to do so. But I don't know, I get a little nervous when there's talk of federalizing the police in other towns. Not that I wouldn't love to see the crime cleaned up in some places, but I just think the precedent is dangerous. What do you think?
No, I agree with you. I mean, first of all, the D.C. Home Rule law, that was Nixon's other big mistake, along with the EPA and a few other things. It wasn't Watergate, actually. It was all the other moderate stuff he did. But that was 1973. And up until then, that federal property, by design of the founders, was there for a reason, to be the place of our central government, of the federal government. And for the simple reason is you can't have a state control the federal government. So let's say you had the federal capital, Washington, D.C., in Pennsylvania or Maryland or Virginia, and all of a sudden the governor of Virginia doesn't like what's going on and shuts down Congress or shuts down this, or they could have understate rule. And so what they deliberately carved out was a federal district that would house the federal government and be governed by the people. And by that I mean, when you elect your federal government, whether it's President Trump or Congress, and you choose to live in the District of Columbia, you're living under the will of the people. And that was the rule ever since the Constitution. And you'd have to have a constitutional amendment to change that, by the way. The president invoked the Home Rule provision in 1973, but in that provision that he cited, he can go back and say, well, we're taking it back. And they never should have handed it over to local home rule, because ever since then, for the last half century, it's been a disaster. You've had a radical city council, a radical mayor, you had the Marion Barry syndrome, and D.C. has gone to hell in a handbasket. And I know because I was there. And it's a very, very dangerous place. But above and beyond that, there's a reason not to put the federal government, the power of the federal government, the seat of the federal government under the purview of one particular state. Which state's going to be? Is it going to be California? Why not have the capital there? And they had the capital in New York, and they had the capital in Philadelphia, and they made this for a reason. So handing it back to the federal government and the power of Congress now, and the federal, shall we say, the apparatus of the federal government to control Washington and clean up crime is something that I think should have happened long ago. Now, as you correctly point out, extrapolating that to the several states and to cities is problematic unless you can, suspend posse comitatus under insurrection. You can't nationalize a police force. We don't have a national police force. That's called a Gestapo. That's called, the KGB. It's called a number of things. We don't have it in America. Matters of most criminal activities are reserved to the states they're committed in. And you don't want a national police force because you don't want somebody looking over your shoulder from a centralized bureaucracy. So I do think that's problematic. We'll see what happens and what they might invoke there. But again, trying to federalize that would be in violation of a number of laws.
Now, what do you make of all the big tech bros and Palantir and all of these guys getting these government contracts and building this system? I guess I'm concerned when we look back, President Trump may end up being with what George W. did with the Patriot Act. President Trump has helped to build with these guys. And I'm not sure President Trump, in his defense, knows, really what it is these guys are really up to. I think I know what he's been briefed about, something that sounds very reasonable, cutting government, Doge. But is that really what it's all about? Is that the facade, the camouflage, for really just setting up a digital system where we are able to track everybody, social credit scores, 15-minute cities, et cetera? What do you think?
Yeah, it is very disturbing. The Palantir effect, if you want to call it that, the Palantir phenomenon, where they're going to use AI for national security purposes. You ought to, not only just grab your wallet, but grab your civil liberties when somebody starts invoking national security. And now the brave new world of artificial intelligence. It's very, very scary stuff. And you would think, of all people, President Trump would understand the threat that a deep state like that, now with the power of this new AI stuff, could have. I mean, what are they going to do? Have automatic FISA warrants? Are they going to monitor people with facial identification? They're already doing that at TSA. So I share your concerns there, and I'm very disturbed by it. And once again, though, it emanates from something I've been complaining about since I wrote my book, Party Animal, The Truth About President Trump, Power, Politics, and the Partisan Press. And that is the national security state and the Department of Defense. You go back to World War I and the Great War before we had the wisdom to name them, right? And it was supposed to be the war to end all wars, Brannon. Now we're just going to have the Great War, and that's going to have a century of peace. Well, every single war, including World War I, brought on the next. We then, through reparations, through the Treaty of Versailles, created Hitler, brought on World War II, which created the Soviet Union, having Yalta, getting in bed with Stalin, and it just keeps going and going. And I'm very concerned that the president really hasn't applied a Doge mentality to the Pentagon. Its budget, when I got to Congress not even a decade ago, was $547 billion. Now it's over $1 trillion. And a lot of that money are these contracts going out to these national security state type efforts. And we cannot disabuse ourselves of the notion that war is the health of the state quick enough. It always is the health of the state. And when we're in perpetual wartime, your civil liberties will never be on guard. So we want a president to end all these foreign conflicts, to get us out of Ukraine, to make certain that we're not needlessly meddling in the Middle East. When we depose Bashar al-Assad and the Alawites in Syria, what happens? Christian Orthodox churches get bombed. And now that's happening in Gaza and the West Bank. The only people that don't have a lobby in Washington and the Middle East are Christians. But those results are from our meddling in there. We had the perfect counterweight to the Ayatollah in Iran with Saddam Hussein. So we kicked him out, And we went back and forth with Saddam all through the Iraq War. You're good, you're bad, you're good. He didn't know what was coming and what was going. Finally, you're out. And then we have a permanent base in Saudi Arabia, Mecca, and we get all this blowback and we can't figure out why. So that's just the foreign policy aspect to it. You look at the domestic aspect and now all of this AI stuff. And I'm telling you, it's a real Achilles heel in the Republican Party, that this constant position of being on perpetual war footing. It is not doing anything for this country at home or abroad.
Well, as always, you got good insight, no doubt about it. And that's why I'd like to have you on. I want to promote real quick his book you mentioned, Party Animal, The Truth About President Trump, Power, Politics, and the Partisan Press. You can get it at Amazon, Party Animal. You also have the audio book, read by Jason himself. You can get that.
A lot of that is in there.
Yeah, it's in there. Party Animal, Amazon.com. All right, let's talk about some of the other issues facing the country. President Trump really wants the interest rates lowered. You and I both, of course, have studied Keynesian economics. You know, what did John Maynard Keynes say? By a continuous process of inflation, we can steal the majority of the people's wealth, and not one man in a million will know what we're doing. And you lower
or
interest.
One economist, apparently.
Good point. So what do you make of this push for lowering interest rates by President Trump?
I mean, these are the same people that said tariffs are inflationary. I mean, these are, what's the old adage about all these economists demanding lower interest rates? It's an economist is someone who, when something works in practice, tells you it won't work in theory, why it fails in theory. Tariffs are a cost push inflation one time. So the price of your Chinese toy might go up. And if that means you have less money to buy a Christmas tree, then the price of Christmas trees go down. General prices don't go up with those sorts of cost push fiscal measures. There's only one thing, as you alluded, that will cause the general price level to rise, and that is more money chasing the same amount of goods and services in the economy. That's what the Federal Reserve does when it lowers interest rates. What it essentially does is it buys more Treasury bills on the open market committee. They can also lower the interest rate they pay reserves in their system too, but usually it's FOMC stuff. And they go in the open market to the money center banks and they say, hey, we're going to buy the T-bill you have, and we're going to pay you, instead of $1,000 for your bond, we're going to pay you $1,020. And that is the effect, lower that interest rate. And all of a sudden that cash goes into the bank. What does the bank do? They make money on credit. They start lending it out. That's the phenomenon that we've had since 2001. That's the phenomenon that went on steroids after the 2007 bubble. And what has it led us to, Brannon? It led us to housing prices that are now outside the reach of Gen Z, of millennials, of Gen X, you name it. Housing prices have never been higher. They're at record levels and people can't afford it. So what came about from that? Well, there were some fiscal effects with the countrywide scandal and Fannie and Freddie guaranteeing bad loans that bid up the price of homes. But primarily, it was artificially low interest rates held at zero for years that made buying a home, the money's going to find something. If you got all this money out there, it could bid up the price of gold. You could get inflation like we had, frankly, we probably had 15% inflation during the Biden years. But real estate is one real barometer. And housing now in a number of communities is simply, forget about it. It's out of reach. I don't know about you. When I bought my first house, I think it was $25,000.
Oh, wow.
And interest rates were very high then, but I could still afford it. Now it's lucky to get $250,000. And so why you would want to do that again by jawboning the Fed to lower interest rates. And by the way, that is a false assurance of economic growth. Remember, Paul Volcker and Ronald Reagan said, no. Real economic growth is more supply, more goods and services going up, while the money supply is coming down, which means it's deflationary. If you've got more widgets out there, but less money chasing them, prices are going to come down. And we saw 7% growth in the 80s. Why you would want to your point about Keynes, is have fake growth, which Wall Street loves, which private equity loves, which mortgage companies love. You have fake growth by printing money and you get a real quick high. But if you're not producing anything more, the only people that benefit are the people that already own the assets, because the value of your house goes up, the value of gold goes up. But if you're a 21-year-old out of college and you don't own either, you've been priced out. So I don't mean to be this, I don't mean for this segment to be our disagree with Trump Day segment, but you got to be honest. And I think it's a horrible prescription. Let me just ask your audience this. How many people out there watching us think prices aren't going up or prices are fine? We ought to be having deflationary prices. We need prices to come down. I say this with tongue in cheek only, but what a lot of young people need right now is a housing collapse.
Yeah. So they can enter the market.
But lowering interest rates would be the reverse of that.
Here's another one you should check out at jasonlewis.substack.com. Finishing off the deep state? Question mark. Not without an answer on Epstein. Now, again, I'm not trying to turn this into where we're
really leaning into it. Well, we're proving our independence, Brannon.
Well, we praise him when we can, and just it's in the news cycle. So he talked about it when he was campaigning. Then he said at the cabinet room table, "Are we still talking about that guy?" And I was like, "Whoa!" That kind of shocked a lot of us. Now we're hearing that the files may be rigged, that the Democrats have doctored the files. I don't know. I have no idea. I haven't seen the files, but I know that some Americans want to see this. Now, I've seen some recent polling that shows that housing, the cost of living, and prices coming down is far more important to people than the Epstein thing. I think it's possible for a lot of folks, the Epstein thing will just die out as these bigger issues just keep percolating. Illegal immigration, Jews being assaulted on the streets, Marxists, running for mayor in New York, Minneapolis. I mean, it's like, wait a minute, that doesn't, Epstein, I want to know what's going on. I don't want pedophiles protected, but these are all kitchen table issues we're now talking about, right?
Yeah, but this is more dangerous for Trump because this cuts to the core of his base.
Yes.
I do think you're right on a general level that economic issues always reign supreme. But when you talk about endless war, for instance, what are we now? He's talking about arming Ukraine if Russia doesn't come to the table. Ukraine's been a part of Tsarist Russia going back over a century, and we're just demanding, we're running up the threat of World War III unless they give back Crimea, which they never ever will. That sort of saber rattling. I personally think that you can make I actually thought the president was going into Iran to cover his backside, saying, look, now I'm going to cut a deal with Iran, and you can't blame me for being weak like Obama because I just bombed him. But we've got to get out from under this perpetual war footing, as I say, because the base will not tolerate that. That's not what the people voted for Donald Trump.
Correct.
And why his coalition is so broad. Well, the same is true with Epstein. Now, in defense of the president, whom I still overwhelmingly support, but in defense of him, had he been so intricately involved in those shenanigans that it would ruin him forever, trust me, the Biden DOJ and the Biden FBI, those files would have been out long ago. This goes back to a national. Now, I do think Trump's mentioned in it, and I think it would be embarrassing for him, but I don't think he's an island hopper, as it were, because Biden would have had a field day with that. But it does embarrass the national security state, especially if it's tied to, say, the Mossad, if Epstein was actually a foreign agent, or if he was gathering these provocative tapes to blackmail people. If all of a sudden this is part of a national security deep state, and Trump still refuses to let it go, it's then, okay, are we really finishing off the deep state or are we not? And that was the essence of that particular post at jasonlewis.substack.com.
Well, you've got a lot of them over here that are very good. People should check it out. Here's one, by the way. Minnesota's greatest hits up north is still a beautiful respite, but the state is a tragic mess. I watched your little homemade video, which looked like you had a great time. And I have family that still lives up there, my mom and dad and all kinds of relatives. But man alive, they're destroying that state.
Well, you know what's going on then.
Yep.
You know what's going on. And though everybody that has an ounce of sanity in Minnesota lives in greater Minnesota now. It is just like Denver and Portland and Seattle. These states with one big metropolitan area that control the population control the whole state. And you can have all these red counties in greater Minnesota, but they don't amount to anything when you've got 60% of the population in the Twin Cities. And as you know, when you go there, I was up there this summer and I took the airport on West 7th Street into from the airport down through St. Paul. I was shocked. I was shocked. It looked like LA. And that was never Minnesota. We always had the great quality of life, and they've lost it completely. The state is a tragic mess. And I fear it's not going to change in the near future. It's going to go the way of a cold California like Illinois or New York or Massachusetts or Oregon. And it's very, very sad.
Well, it is sad. And, you know, when we were living up there and they had the Super Bowl back in the early 90s or whatever it was, people came to town. Their big comment was, it's so clean. It's so clean.
Right.
There was no graffiti, the street, it was just so clean. And you could live in St. Paul proper, okay? In these historic, you know, smaller homes that are really lining the streets, something like out of Mayberry. And they were homes that young people could afford to live in. Some people had lived there for 40, 50, 60 years, but younger people would come in there. And you were just shocked at how St. Paul, that capital, was so affordable, relatively speaking, and clean and crime-free. Well, last time I was up there, I thought I was in Somalia. Right. The Mall of America was covered over. The Mall of America was covered over with
you hit on the fundamental fact there. This is replacement theory writ large. There is no Nordic culture in Minnesota. You can look long and far for the Carlsons and the Andersons, and they're nowhere to be found. It is Somalis. It is Hmong. It is migrants from America, but they're from Chicago or Gary, Indiana, or Houston, where George Floyd was from. This has nothing emblematic of the North Minneapolis my mother grew up in, was born and raised in, and that's gone. And let that be a lesson for the entire country.
Let that be a lesson. So what do you think, in closing, Congressman, is going to happen the midterms? You know, we have on Mark Mitchell here a lot with Rasmussen polling. He says right now it's not looking good. Looks like they're going to lose the House. They could even lose the Senate, but of course it's still a year away from this November. But what do you think? You had to make a prediction.
I think that the wise thing they did this time, and there's an argument to be made, we should have done that in the 115th when we went for healthcare reform first before we did the Tax Cut and Jobs Act. By renewing the Tax Cut and Jobs Act with the big, beautiful bill, you will get an economic bump. Now, those things take time, although I think there's some evidence to show that it's already happening. 3% growth, median income is starting to rise again. And should the economy get that bump and it takes 6 months, well, that puts us in next summer. And remember, you know, George Bush was riding high after Iraq, and that was 1990. All of a sudden, Bill Clinton runs on the economy, and that was after Bush raised taxes in 1990. So these things can happen within these yearly frames. So thank goodness that got passed, because I do think, should they survive, that'll be the saving grace.
Okay, one final thing just came to mind. You're in Florida. We've got now what do you call it? Alligator Alcatraz in Florida?
Yeah, alligator Alcatraz. Yeah.
And they're talking about adding one in Indiana. What are your thoughts? I want to see the illegals moved out, but I start getting nervous when governments start building and throwing up camps and tents and things like that. Because I keep thinking,
I wouldn't get that nervous. I don't know of a prison in the country that I'd like to spend a weekend at. So it really doesn't matter whether it's surrounded by alligators, but you got to have a place to put these folks. And it all comes down to the fact that the Biden administration was not enforcing the law. If people wanted asylum, they had to do it legally through the ports of entry. Instead, they came across in millions and then said, oh, by the way, I'm applying for asylum. They should have been thrown out right then, but they weren't. So you had all these millions of illegals in the country because of that. And what do? Well, you know, it's very, very difficult to put them all on one plane. So at some point, you got to have a place to house them. And I think it's evidence that Trump actually really has gotten control of the border and is cleaning up the country. So I'm not perturbed by it, and people in Florida are not perturbed by it. I can guarantee you that.
Well, I just want to know what they did with all these other places. Because during the Biden years, we had drones flying over with Michael Yon, with Anthony Rubin, with Todd Bensman. Todd Bensman now, he was on here once a week for like 3 or 4 years. He's now 4 years. He's now the top assistant to Tom Homan, and he texts me articles from time to time. But we had all these drones showing all of these massive DHS tents and camps built 10 of them or more all over Texas. I'm like, well, why are they building more places when we have all these DHS permanent tents and cities that were built and you never hear anything about them? In fact, when people would go to find them, some of the people in the community didn't even know what they were talking about. They're like, hey, where's the big DHS tent for illegals that they're building? And no one knew where they were. A lot of the people in the town didn't even know what they were talking about. It's like, oh, turns out it's 10 miles out of town. They were so well hidden that even some locals didn't even know where they were there. I just want to know.
Yeah, but I think part of the problem was, Brannon, that a lot of the locals were not good actors. That some of the locals had depended upon illegal immigration or had families there. Housing them close to the border was becoming problematic. Now, I don't know if that's the entire reason for building places like Alcatraz, but I know that was part of the reason that you'd have people springing people, you had people fighting them on the border. So moving them around became a little bit easier to manage, I presume, but I don't have all the answers
Okay,
to that.
one more, if they stop popping in my mind, to ask Jason Lewis. We got to get you more often so that I'm not backlogged with all my questions. 2028, Marco Rubio as VP, so it's a Vance Rubio ticket. What do you see?
We'll see how things go. I do think what really attracts the base to J.D. Vance, say, as opposed to Mike Pence, is he's the real thing. He did not have to come pushing and screaming or dragging and kicking to America First. Vance has been talking about this since Hillbilly Elegy, on how we've forsaken middle America, how we've forsaken middle-class people, how opioids have destroyed them, how illegal immigration has destroyed our cities. And in many ways, he was out in front of Trump before Trump. Now, not always, but he's a true believer. So I think he's probably got the inside edge. But you listen to Robert F. Kennedy. He says now that Marco Rubio has become a true believer, more so America First guy, has had this metamorphosis towards Trump that he didn't have before. So you may be onto something. We'll see.
Well, you guys should follow him right here. jasonlewis.substack.com, jasonlewis.substack.com. Now, here he explained a lot of these issues we're facing today. He was ahead of the curve, party animal. The truth about President Trump, power politics, and the partisan press. You can get it at Amazon. But of course, go ahead and mark jasonlewis.substack.com. We need to get you back as a more regular guest, Jason.
Thanks, Brannon. Always a pleasure, my friend.
You too. Jason Lewis checking in. Check it out, folks. jasonlewis.substack.com. We'll be right back after this short break.
You woke up with a sore throat and a low-grade fever. You know you are getting sick, so here's your choices. You can get sicker and miss work. Try to see a doctor this week or sit hours in a crowded waiting room at urgent care.
I have a smarter option for you. Open your medical emergency kit. Match your symptoms to doctor-recommended prescription in your booklet and take the right meds now and get well faster.
This is not a first aid kit. It's like having an urgent care in your home. It includes doctor-prescribed medications to treat over 39 medical issues like respiratory infections, strep throat, pneumonia, UTIs, and more.
No waiting to see the doctor and no standing in line at the pharmacy. It's right here.
Every home should have at least one medical emergency kit, and here's how to order.
Go to worldviewhealthcare.com. Your kit to treat dozens of common and serious illnesses is rushed to your door. worldviewhealthcare.com. That's worldviewhealthcare.com.
The emergency kit available at worldviewhealthcare.com. Make sure you don't have to go to urgent care. I got pneumonia. I didn't have to go. I took this last year. Stayed at home. Went to bed.